Court has upheld a federal gun control law that intends to protect domestic violence victims. Justices ruled in favor of a 1994 ban on firearms for people under restraining orders to stay away from their spouses or partners. President Biden praised the decision, saying no one should have to worry about their abuser getting a gun.
It's a really collective sigh of relief for those of us who work on behalf of survivors of domestic violence every day.
The judge in Donald Trump's classified documents case held a hearing Friday to consider arguments from the former president seeking to remove special counsel Jack Smith from the case. Attorneys for Trump claim Smith was unlawfully appointed to the case. Friday's hearing is just the start of a three-day excursion into legal arguments around the case, including a gag order request by Smith. Federal officials are investigating a Southwest Airlines flight that dropped low enough to trigger a low-altitude warning while it was still 9 miles away from an airport in Oklahoma. It is the second recent incident involving a Southwest flight narrowly missing the ground. In April, a separate flight aborted its approach into a Hawaii airport after descending to just 400 feet above the Pacific Ocean. Those are your headlines. Now, here's a look at your weather on the ones.
Hi there, I'm meteorologist Robert Santos. For the last several days, we've been talking about the eastern half of the country experiencing hot temperatures. That will continue through Saturday, although Boston, your temperature coming down into the 70s. Now, the Southwest, it is beginning to heat up even more, but that's going to be interior Southern California. So some of the Inland Empire cities, for instance, getting up into the triple digits as well. We'll be watching some heavy rainfall opportunities here coming across the Great Lakes and eventually into the Northeast for Sunday. So be aware that flash flooding is possible there.
The nation's high court making its major Second Amendment ruling Friday. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sharon Tazwell. The Supreme Court upheld a federal law that bars guns for some domestic abusers. Justices rejected an argument pressed by gun rights groups saying the law violated the Second Amendment. Spectre Biden is responding.
In its 8-1 decision Friday, the Supreme Court upheld a 1994 federal law that bars anyone convicted of domestic violence or named in a domestic violence restraining order from owning a gun. Justice Clarence Thomas was the lone no vote. It was the court's first major Second Amendment decision since it expanded gun rights 2 years ago. Domestic violence prevention advocates applauding the ruling.
For the last 30 years, this law has helped protect survivors, and now we can breathe a collective sigh of relief that it will continue to be available as a tool in reducing domestic violence homicides.
When the court expanded gun rights 2 years ago, it said judges should only consider whether a gun safety law fits into the nation's history of gun regulation. In Friday's decision, the court noted that the U.S. does have a tradition of limiting gun rights for people deemed dangerous. But the court also reinterpreted the definition of dangerous to include domestic abuse.
How narrowly do you view tradition? And what the court said was you look at it broadly. You look at the broad principle more than the specific application.
The NRA criticized the ruling, adding, the Supreme Court's narrow opinion offers no endorsement of red flag laws or the dozens of other unconstitutional laws that the NRA is challenging across the country. Some legal scholars, though, say the ruling does have implications for so-called red flag laws, though it leaves the door open to other questions.
It doesn't solve the red flag law question of standards of proof, due process, the duration of the sanction on the person who's subject to the restraining order, and so on.
Experts say the ruling is unlikely to affect the recent conviction of President Joe Biden's son Hunter on gun charges. In Washington, Harry Lee, Spectrum News.
At least 2 people are dead, multiple others wounded after a shooter in Arkansas. Authorities say gunfire broke out at Mad Butcher Grocery in Fordyce, that's located in South Arkansas. The manager of the store tells CNN the man came into the store with a shotgun and ended up in a shootout with police.
It's tragic. Our hearts are broken. Our prayers, along with Governor Sanders, the entire state of Arkansas, will be with this community and with those affected victims.
2 law enforcement officers are among the victims shot. They're expected to make a full recovery. The gunman is in police custody. With less than a week until the first presidential debate, Donald Trump's legal issues are back in the spotlight. The judge overseeing Trump's classified documents heard arguments by the former president seeking to remove special counsel Jack Smith from the case. And as Charlotte Scott reports from Washington, a hearing in New York Friday focused on a gag order in his hush money trial.
Trump say Jack Smith, who has brought charges against him in Florida and Washington, was appointed in violation of the Constitution. On Friday, a federal judge in Florida heard arguments from both sides on the merits of the claim.
I'm sad to say that she's out of her judicial depth.
The decision by U.S. District Court Judge Aileen Cannon to even hold the hearing has drawn criticism from many legal experts. They note that numerous courts already upheld the validity of federal special prosecutors, so there is no need for Cannon to review the issue. It is the latest in a series of actions and inaction by Cannon that have raised eyebrows. In the inaction category, her failure to set a trial date in the case.
Nothing focuses attorneys' minds like a date certain for trial. And that she has this case in drift the way she does, frankly, is judicial malpractice.
Cannon will also hear arguments next week over a defense motion to exclude evidence seized by the FBI during its search of Mar-a-Lago nearly 2 years ago. Delays to the case, further reducing the chance of a trial before Election Day. Trump has pleaded not guilty to charges of keeping highly sensitive classified documents after he left the White House and obstructing the government's efforts to get them back. Meanwhile, in New York, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office asked the judge in Trump's hush money case to continue his gag order on the former president. The order prevents Trump from criticizing the jurors in the case. Last month, the jury convicted Trump of all 34 charges. He is to be sentenced on July 11th, 4 days before Republicans in Milwaukee nominate him as their candidate for president.
And Charlotte Scott joins us now from Washington. Charlotte, we're getting a look at some new fundraising numbers between Trump and Biden. What can you tell us?
Yeah, Sharon, Trump was fundraising on his conviction in the hush money case last month. Numbers now show that Trump's campaign raised $141 million in May. That's about $55 million more than Biden. In recent days, Biden has raised an additional roughly $60 million, which includes a big check from former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg of $20 million. Biden's campaign did have more cash in the bank at the end of May, but Trump is continuously showing us and proving to us that he's a strong fundraiser despite his legal troubles. Sharon.
All right, Charlotte Scott in Washington. Thanks for the breakdown. Trouble in the skies. The FAA is looking into a Southwest Airlines flight that triggered an altitude warning while approaching an airport in Oklahoma City. Spectrum News' Carla Reddit has a look at new video capturing the moments the plane was just hundreds of feet above the ground.
This is Southwest Airlines Flight 4069 over Yukon, Oklahoma, Wednesday, about 9 miles from the airport in Oklahoma City. Just after midnight local time, air traffic control warned the pilots of a low-altitude alert, asking the KTC.net. Tracking data from Flight Radar 24 reveals that the jet, which took off from Las Vegas, came within 525 feet of the ground before climbing briefly and then safely landing. The FAA confirmed in a statement Thursday that it is investigating the incident. Southwest Airlines says it's working with the agency to understand and address any irregularities with the aircraft's approach to the airport. It's the second frightening descent by a Southwest jet since April, when a flight landing in Hawaii went as low as 400 feet above the ocean before climbing after an aborted landing attempt. The jets involved in both cases are Boeing 737 models, and while the cause of these two descents have not been determined, they come as Boeing is mired in previous safety and quality control mishaps. The company's CEO faced harsh bipartisan criticism on Capitol Hill.
Our culture is far from perfect, but we are taking action and we are making progress.
Southwest tried to assure the flying public after Wednesday's incident, saying nothing is more important than the safety of their customers and employees. Carla Reddit, Spectrum News.
Just ahead on Spectrum News, houses collapsing into the Atlantic Ocean. How a new bill could help homeowners recover from coastal erosion.
Spectrum News Plus, news from a new perspective, dedicated to refreshing storytelling and empowering communities across the nation, with balanced reporting, providing real context and in-depth coverage 24 hours a day. We are Spectrum News Plus, streaming now on the Spectrum News app and free with your Spectrum subscription.
At Spectrum, we know how much you depend on the reliability of our products and services. Now, we've taken a new step forward in reliability by identifying potential service issues before they become a problem. If you're affected, we'll contact you and help schedule a free service appointment with one of our expert technicians. The proactive maintenance of our network is one of the many reasons Spectrum delivers the most reliable internet speeds in the nation. Spectrum, keeping you connected.
When I never graduated from high school, I realized I wanted to go back to school because I didn't want to work these back-breaking jobs the rest of my life. With the help of my father and having my son, that was all the motivation that I needed to come back to school.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
Well, it's been a stormy last to all of this, from the southwest up into the Great Lakes, out into the northeast, related to the heavy rainfall, the damaging wind, and also some of the hail there. And it sort of matches the path here of where we're expecting severe weather, a slight chance of that for Friday all across these areas in yellow. Now, here's how it changes for Saturday. We see that chance basically focused right around Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois. So heads up about severe weather. And then once we get into Sunday, that chance diminishes a little more, but we see it mainly out here across portions of the northeast. So there's the storms that basically bring that chance for some severe weather there for you. Let's get a closer look at the timing of this. Here's Saturday 9 o'clock coming across Wisconsin, Michigan, and then Saturday all the way into Sunday. We see it popping up here in the northeast. Sunday even right off the coast there of New York. Now, the rainfall is certainly going to add up. So areas of that in parts of the northeast. Now, farther south, a convective low is bringing some thunderstorms through portions of Florida here. So we are expecting rainfall amounts lighter than what we're getting up in the northern tier. But you can see there those areas in purple from Jacksonville to Orlando, anywhere from 1.5 inches to 2.5 inches. Now, the National Weather Service is watching out for this. A tropical disturbance there could become a tropical depression. And same thing in the Bay of Campeche, another tropical disturbance there. Now, the next 3 days in Tampa, we're looking at 90s with rain in the forecast. Orlando, Florida, also thunderstorms in the forecast with low 90s, so it's going to be wet, it's going to be humid, it's going to be hot there. In Bangor, Maine, you've got a gradual warming back into about 70s, but yeah, you've got pretty much a stormy next few days. And in Houston, dry and hot with rain back in the forecast on Monday.
If you're just joining us, here's what you need to know. The Supreme Court upheld a federal gun control law intended to protect domestic violence victims. The ruling means that anyone subject to a restraining order cannot own a firearm. At least 2 people are dead and multiple others injured in a mass shooting in southern Arkansas. 2 law enforcement officers among the wounded victims. Federal officials are investigating a Southwest Airlines flight that triggered a low-altitude warning. Authorities say the plane descended to just 525 feet above the ground as it approached an airport in Oklahoma. And that's what you need to know this evening. The White House and the Israeli Prime Minister are at odds over U.S. support for Israel's military operations in Gaza. The Biden administration expressed disappointment to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after the Israeli linked heavy munitions. Meantime, concerns are mounting over the conflict in Gaza expanding amid ongoing tension between Israel and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah.
The risk for the conflict in the Middle East to widen is real and must be avoided. one rash move, one miscalculation could trigger a catastrophe that goes far beyond the border and, frankly, beyond imagination.
Further north in Europe, Russia is calling for security talks with the U.S., but the Kremlin says a meeting must be comprehensive and include discussions about Ukraine. During a trip to Romania Friday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken reaffirmed U.S. support for Kyiv. The FDA has authorized the first menthol-flavored e-cigarettes, acknowledging that vaping flavors can reduce the harm of traditional tobacco. The decision lends new credibility to vaping companies to reduce the toll of smoking tobacco, while opponents argue that flavored e-cigarettes can appeal to teens off the market. Rising waters have caused a number of homes in North Carolina to collapse into the ocean. Some homeowners are deciding whether to stay or go. New legislation in Congress could make it easier for coastal homeowners to actually move their houses to safer locations. Spectrum's Reuben Jones tells us more about the financial help.
People from around the world travel to North Carolina's Outer Banks for the idyllic beaches. But lately, there's also a focus on what's being pushed out to sea. Houses, one by one, are collapsing into the Atlantic Ocean. Here in Rodanthe, the National Park Service says 6 privately owned houses have collapsed since 2020. More are at risk of doing the same.
There would be times I'd step outside to do something, and I would just break down in tears.
Spectrum man last year at their Rodanthe home. Dowdy has owned it for around 2 decades. But now the crashing waves of the Atlantic are perilously close, leaving them with few choices.
You basically had what options?
Do nothing and lose the house eventually, sooner or later, or go to the expense of having the house moved, for which there is no insurance coverage.
They went with the latter, moving the house further from the ocean at a cost of $185,000. A new bill from Maine Democrat Congresswoman Shelley Pingree and North Carolina Republican Congressman Greg Murphy, who represents the Outer Banks, would provide financial assistance to coastal residents around the country whose homes are at risk of collapsing.
Houses are going to fall into the ocean. We need to stop that. We need to tear them. We need to have the owner be able to take the money and take them down before they become
Others to go towards demolition or relocation. The money comes from the National Flood Insurance Program, which doesn't cover long-term erosion or advanced collapse payments.
These are dangerous homes to buy because they are at risk of collapsing. Why put federal dollars to help here?
Well, this is the National Flood Insurance Program. This is what all homeowners are allowed to buy into and actually should buy into.
Lined up with that one.
Today, 20 Man is breathing a little easier. But even with his house moved, rising sea levels from climate change could pose a long-term risk.
Ultimately, I think the beach is going to have to undergo beach replenishment.
In Washington, Reuben Jones, Spectrum News.
Coming up on Spectrum News, making a lasting impact during Pride Month. What police officers are doing to help the LGBTQ+.
Here's the deal. In this election year, people need a place to explore national issues that have an impact on their community. To understand those issues better, we're bringing together our team of local political journalists from across the country to break down what's happening. So join us every week to catch up on the key stories making a big difference across the nation and in your local community.
Watch The Big Deal with Errol Lewis Friday nights at 9 Eastern, 8 Central on Spectrum News Plus. Available on all of your favorite devices exclusively on Spectrum.
Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me.
That was perfect.
But
We will be tracking some storms for the weekend, plus the heat. Hi there, I'm meteorologist Robert Santos. That heavy rain in the upper Midwest, it could cause some flash flooding. And we're also tracking the chance for some flash flooding in the Four Corners. And the increasing heat happening out in the West is going to be a big story over the weekend. So here's a look at some of the alerts related to heat. We've had this in place all week long for many of you in the Northeast, and some of you getting some relief now from the heat, just a little bit, at least up in Boston, New England states there. This is the flood watch that's coming across places like Minneapolis and Spring Valley and Waterloo. Flood watches here through the Four Corners because of moisture coming up from basically the remnants of Alberta. And then in California, heat advisories all up and down the Central Valley into Northern California and Southern California. We've got heat-related alerts here as well. So look at the temperatures all across. You look at Los Angeles and you say, 84, that's not so hot. Yeah, it's hotter than it has been, but it's the surrounding cities in LA, in the Inland Empire, in the valleys, where those temperatures will get up into the upper 90s and the triple digits, which you've already had in the Southwest, but coming up a little bit more from the last few days. And then here are those 90s all across the Northeast once again. But as I mentioned, Boston coming down to about 70s. Okay, so that ridge of high pressure that's kept much of the east pretty hot retrogrades or slides basically back to the west, and that's what's going to influence the weather across the west. So take, for instance, Boston, Massachusetts, where the temperature on average is about 70 this time of year, below average for Saturday. But there's the bump again. More days in the 80s and 70s for next week. In Columbus, Ohio, you've got some hot days ahead and some 90s at that. So over the weekend, especially on Saturday, be extra careful if you're going to be outdoors. You may want to stay indoors in an air-conditioned room, air-conditioned mall or home. There you see 80s all the way into next week. So temperatures getting closer to average next week. New York, yeah, we still have a couple of more days in the 90s. So the weekend will be hot, and that's, look at that, Sunday. That's 16 degrees above average. And then we've got some 80s next week, but it's still going to be above average. In Dallas, Texas, all 90s, mid to upper 90s, particularly hot around mid next week. And in Las Vegas, if you're heading that way, triple digits, yeah, pretty much here to stay. We're getting up to about 111 for some of the hottest days, and that's going to be on Tuesday and Wednesday.
The Boston Celtics celebrated their historical 18th championship win with a parade Friday. As only Boston does it, the Duck Boat Parade began in front of TD Garden and rolled through the city. More than 1 million fans turned out to get a glimpse of superstar Jason Tatum and his teammates. Well, the Celtics beat Dallas for their record 18th NBA title. The Edmonton Oilers host the Florida Panthers tonight in Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final. The Panthers are just one win away from winning the championship. If the Oilers win, they'll become the third team in NHL history to force a Game 7 after losing the first 3 games to start the series. The first puck will drop at 8 p.m. Eastern. As part of Pride Month, we are shining a light on people, businesses, and organizations educating society about issues and challenges facing the LGBTQ+ community.
The program has been around for over a decade. Through that time, officers have made an impact on both the LGBTQ+ community and the department.
Service is a part of who Sergeant Guadalupe Velasquez is. She's been with the Milwaukee Police Department for 15 years and continues to find new ways to serve.
I think it's really important. I'm actually really proud that I'm one of the 2 liaisons.
Sergeant Velasquez is an LGBTQ+ liaison for the department, in addition to working in the License Investigation Unit. In the liaison role, she works to increase visibility in recruiting and welcoming diverse MPD officers, and in sharing issues facing the city's LGBTQ+ community.
I know it's really hard work to do, but I also am really proud that we can make those movements within the department to try to bridge the gap with the LGBT community, make everyone feel safer and willing to work with us.
She's worked to bring the Safe Place programs and organizations that are safe places for members of the LGBTQ+ community and victims of human trafficking to call for police assistance. With the rise in crimes against transgender people in recent years, Velasquez says this work is more critical than ever. She's helped make sure the transgender crime victims are not being misgendered in MPD reports.
Just those changes of not releasing any gender or race with homicide victims has helped us show the community that we take those concerns very seriously.
She's around to answer any question or concern with the goal of finding common ground for more open minds and communication.
The whole officers, whenever they have concerns about whether it's inclusion or, if they feel harassed or anything like that, they have someone to contact too.
Using her experience to create an inclusive workplace and community while building trust in public safety. In Milwaukee, Megan Marshall, Spectrum News.
Right after this short break. Stay with us.
At Spectrum News, we're committed to strengthening the fabric of local communities through our reporting, with stories that inspire and news that matters. Streaming live on your smart TV and connected devices, plus on-demand weather forecasts. It's all there as you step outside with the Spectrum News mobile app, keeping you informed and in the know throughout your day. Spectrum News Plus, local stories, connecting communities. Exclusively for Spectrum customers. Now available on your favorite devices.
At Spectrum, our workforce of over 100,000 employees are all located right here in the U.S. You can find them in our stores, in the field, 100% U.S.-based customer service. Our team works hard to provide the towns, cities, and neighborhoods they live in with the reliable services that everyone counts on, making us one of America's most trusted companies. We're Spectrum, creating jobs and opportunities across the country, and proud to be 100% U.S.-based.
Today, I'm going to talk to you about physics. Come on in, girls. Let's go. This is the first rocket to get humans to Mars.
Really tall.
I'm a rocket structural engineer, designing and building parts of the rocket. You are the generation that will be stepping foot on Mars. Do I have a group of astronauts on my hands?
Yes.
You can become a rocket scientist or whatever else you want to be.
Why I'm never gonna let you go. Never gonna let you go. Babe, I'm never gonna let you go. No, no, never gonna let you go.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Never gonna let you go.